Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kieran Howells. I am the head of content at HR Grapevine, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today, which is titled Building a Positive Working Culture Through Trust. So a little bit about what that means. Building trust with employees is fundamental to creating a positive working culture. Yet, in a recent study, just over 25% of HR managers believed that all their employees felt all of their employees felt confident reporting concerns of wrongdoing. Just 25%. I mean, that's a pretty shocking number, isn't it? So it's for that reason today that we're going to discuss how you yourself can build employee trust through feedback and whistleblowing systems. So we're going to be delving into how to gain buy-in from senior management, how to implement and remain legally compliant, obviously very, very important, how to foster and encourage engagement, and also how to create opportunities from conversations rather than simply reacting to crises as they occur. So I have the pleasure of being joined by some really fantastic people here today. We have Rachel Mackey, who's account management team leader at SafeCall. Hi there, Rachel.
Hi.
Joanna Lewis is the managing director of SafeCall. So thanks so much for being here, Joanna. Great to have you. And then we also have the pleasure of the company of Tom Astle, senior business auditor at Co-op, who will dive into the conversation in just a little bit. But before we do kind of get into the meat of the conversation, a tiny weeny bit of housekeeping. We do have some time at the end of the session to answer any and all questions that you, our audience, have. There should be a little box on the side of your screen, I think just over there, where you can ask any questions. So do get them in. Also, we're going to run some polls. It's really great to hear what the situation is with you and your organization. So do answer those polls. I think the first one should be live on your screen right now, and we'll get to that in just a second. But I think that's just about enough talking from me. I'm going to pass over to Joanna to tell us a little bit about SafeCall.
Yeah, thanks, Kieran. Morning, everyone. I just wanted to introduce SafeCall so that you kind of know our background and what we're here to talk about today. So SafeCall is a 24-year-old organisation, and we offer predominantly outsourced whistleblowing services. So what does that mean? It means we work with organisations such as yourself to be your independent partner with regards to any whistleblowing concerns raised by your employees. We've been, as I say, operating for 24 years in, well, over 100 countries globally, and have about 900 customers. And I think, just to tell you what, I suppose, why trust is important to us and why we're really excited to talk about kind of a culture of trust today. Our call handlers who take all the calls from anybody speaking up about any concern are all former police officers with around 25 to 30 years experience. And the reason that we employ former police officers is we understand that it takes a great deal of courage and a great deal of trust to speak up about something which is troubling you in the workplace. We believe that creating that culture within SafeCall and for your organisation is truly important to be able to hear about matters which are really important as well. So we're delighted to be here today. And naturally, given we focus on whistleblowing, a lot of today's conversation will be focused around whistleblowing and the information that you fed back to us on the survey.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Joanna. Let's go ahead and have a look at our first poll then, which has been live for a little while. I'm going to have a little look at the results here. And we can see the question that we asked was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident do you think that your employees are to speak up without fear of reprisal in your organization? So obviously we have that kind of sliding scale from 1 to 10. So 2.5% said not at all confident. So about 12.8% voted at about 3. 3 out of 10. 5.1% said 4. 20.5%, the second largest amount, said about 5, about halfway point. 10.2% said 6, and by far the largest amount, 28.2% said 7. And then it's 10.2% said 8. 5.1% said 9 and 5.1% said 10. So not very much at the complete other end of the scale. Most people are around the middle there. So that's quite interesting. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting and probably what we would expect to see, because people joining this webinar clearly, are interested in building that culture or improving that culture of trust that they've already got. And I think, I'm sure most organisations have made steps to make, to do that, but it sounds as though there's still work that people feel can be done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so let's set the scene a little bit. The fundamental question we must ask is, why is building trust within your organization so important?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question. I think that, why is building trust generally important? I think at the moment, we're constantly bombarded with news and fake news stories that, we don't necessarily trust. And I think generally people are less trusting. Now, why is that important in the workplace? Well, trust builds positivity. It breeds confidence, it gets engaged employees, and ultimately, engaged employees are more productive. They want to stay with your organization. If people trust your organization and your brand, they're going to want to join your organization. So the caliber of people that you attract improves. So I just think that, building trust, which sounds easy, but it's not necessarily an easy thing to do, is super important for any organization.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems to me that it's kind of the mortar that holds everything else together, really, definitely within HR's remit, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think, like you said at the beginning, Kieran, it's the kind of the impact of not having that trust. It's a bit like building a good reputation versus losing that good reputation. It's not necessarily easy to do, but then it's quite easy to lose. And, you can then not hear about things if people aren't feeling empowered to speak up. You might not know what's going on in your organization. You might not be able to fix things early, and that can then spiral. So putting measures in place to be able to support and build that can only be a positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we're in such an interesting time to be talking about this, because the headlines are rife with companies who are in the exact position that we're talking about, who have not dealt with things the right way. And it's front page news. And as you said there, it's very hard to build trust, but it's very easy to lose it, isn't it? So my next question for you then is, what is the potential impact of not having a positive working culture and of maybe not inspiring trust in your people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like I said, it's about that damage to your reputation, really, which ultimately would have an impact on, I guess, revenue, because, ultimately reputation and revenue go hand in hand. But I think more than just that, it's about, wanting to be that great employer, having that great culture, and clearly it will have an impact on that. So I think what we're looking to do is to support and encourage organizations to be able to look at look at themselves and build that trust and that culture over time, in various different ways. But what I would like to do actually now is introduce Rachel into the call, because Rachel, as you said earlier, is one of our account managers, and Rachel has obviously works with many of our customers and can probably give some real life examples of customers and their experiences around this.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. So I would say on that, just a comment to begin with, most of our most successful clients at SafeCall, definitely, as we've seen with the survey at the start of this webinar, trust and building trust is really important to them and something they do see as a high priority. But I think what I'd want to comment on, and certainly what comes up a lot, is it's not just about building trust. Everyone seems to be on that journey of trying to build trust. Kieran actually referred to it before as well, but actually maintaining trust is also really, really difficult, and something we want to touch on today too, because what I'd just kind of like to point out from my conversations is that it is that piece of, obviously, once you've built the trust, then it's an ongoing journey that we need to keep reinforcing that with our employees. It's a fast-paced world now. We have constantly changing employees. It's a message that we need to be continually communicating with our employees. It isn't kind of just something that we reach a point and we can stop it. It's definitely an ongoing journey. And that's certainly something we see with our clients, and that me as an account manager, I help them to sort of solve that and take them on that journey as well. So with that, actually, we have Tom on our webinar as well today. Tom is one of our lovely customers, the Co-op, and what we would deem actually to be doing a really good job and really successful at creating trust and sort of generating that within the workforce, and building up actually a really successful whistleblowing sort of and speak up campaign. And like we say, nobody's perfect. This is an ongoing journey, but it would be really interesting today to get the insights from Tom on their team and things like that. So welcome, Tom. To start with, do you just want to kind of introduce yourself, maybe a little bit of like the whistleblowing history, so to speak, at the Co-op and your team that you work in?
Yeah, sure. So thanks very much for inviting me this morning. So it's a pleasure to be here. For the benefit of everyone listening, my name is Tom Astel, and I'm a senior internal auditor at the Co-op. And one of the hats that I wear in the business is managing our whistleblowing process. And as Rachel said there, it's been a journey over a number of years to try and increase trust in our process. We've tried to do this in a number of different ways. So at the Co-op, you might be thinking it's quite interesting that an internal auditor has sat here talking about this. So the business made a conscious decision for whistleblowing to sit with the internal audit department to provide a bit of independence and a bit of, check and challenge for any reports that do come in. So everything is treated on a case-by-case basis, and we can make sure that the right investigations held for every report that we receive. I think that helps to give colleagues and external stakeholders trust in what we do. And it shows how important it is to the business in terms of trying to build that right culture and creating a psychologically safe environment for people to speak up and raise their concerns.
Amazing. Thanks, Tom. So do you want to just talk us through perhaps some of the successful things you've done, or some of the areas where you've tried to make improvements to sort of trust in whistleblowing within your organisation, some of the tactics you guys have trialled?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as you said, it's an ongoing journey. So there's always ways of improving things and doing things better. Some of the things we've done over the last sort of 12, 18 months or so, we've run quite a big awareness campaign over the last couple of years, which involved making sure we had posters up in the backs of all our food stores across the UK, as well as all our other sites. We've made sure our Speak Up hotline is very visible on both our internal and our external websites, so people know how to contact us with any concerns that they have. We've tried to streamline all our policy documents, and internally over the last sort of 6 months, we've launched an all-colleague code to try and make it clearer for colleagues to know what is and what isn't acceptable, and if you experience something that isn't acceptable, what you can do about it to try and get it resolved. And we've also developed some internal guides to help investigators who look into these cases for us, to make sure that all investigations are done in the right way, which again I think is so important for trust. If people know that if they raise a concern and it will be treated in the right way and looked into in the appropriate manner, and any action that needs to be taken is taken, that's such a big enabler for trust. And the only other final thing I'd mention is we've also made better use of the Safe Call portal to contact directly with whistleblowers. One, in terms of getting more information to make sure investigations are as detailed and thorough as possible, but also just to make sure all reporters know how seriously we take their concerns and what we're doing about it.
Yeah, I think that last one especially is a really good point, and I know something with sort of my wider client base that I speak with can be a bit underutilized. Obviously, being able to actually communicate with your reporter And like you say, make sure they know that you're taking it seriously, that you're taking actions. It can be when you put the shoe on the opposite foot and you think about a whistleblower sat there, if they haven't actually had any sort of feedback or acknowledgement from you, they just automatically assume that nothing's been done and nothing's happened. So that communication piece is so important, like you say. And we've noticed, for a pat on the back with the co-op, they message so quickly to their reporters to let them know that they've acknowledged the report and that they've seen it and they've got eyes on it. And that is, it's a really critical piece of this whole part of building trust, I would say. So what about kind of the future, Tom? We've said it's sort of a journey. What would you say you guys would like to do, better, or perhaps look into more for the future for continuing to build trust?
It's a really good question. There's a couple of things I'm thinking about at the minute. One is around the reporting that we do and the management information we have. Yeah. We've invested a bit of time in improving that recently, but there's still so much more we can do, particularly in terms of what insights we can pull out of individual cases we get to get that holistic picture. And I know on my long to-do list, there's something around developing a dashboard which I could push out to the rest of the business, so I can make sure senior colleagues have visibility of any concerns in their area. And likewise, I'd like to do more deep dives into individual investigations to make sure that they are being conducted in the right way and are coming to the right outcomes. And I think coming at that, again, I think that will only enhance the trust that people can have in our process.
Definitely. There's some really good points and areas to consider. I'd say that with that as well, we release this benchmarking report. I know you've seen it before each year, looking at our wider clients' data, and it's always an interesting point to look at alongside that as well, looking at your own reports and just understanding, general trends and things like that too. But yeah, thank you so much, Tom. Thanks for giving us those insights. It's really, really helpful to share that today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Joe, have you got any other questions or anything for Tom?
No, but thanks, Tom. Really interesting, as Rachel says.
So I think our next section is just actually around starting to build trust and actually some of the practicalities.
I think what we were going to do, though, sorry to interrupt, talk about the results of the survey first, and then talk about kind of how we might be able to, obviously, as you say, build that kind of culture of trust. And so I'm going to read my notes here because I don't want to make up any stats. The survey went out to many different HR professionals, and we had 226 responses. And this can be downloaded for free for anybody who hasn't already done so. Would like to see it after the webinar. And the respondents really range from companies with 0 to 49 employees, and then those with more than 5,000. So a really good range of different organisations, with the majority, I think about 84%, being in the UK, and then the rest sort of globally. So a great cross section of different organisations. What was really interesting to me was that the majority, 79%, are aware of the legislation that they need to adhere to with regards to whistleblowing and to speak up culture. And actually 85% do have a whistleblowing policy in place, which sounds great. But then I thought about this last night, and I thought, but that's still 30 or more organisations that actually don't have anything in place. And clearly there's legislation which would suggest that should be in place, but also, as we're talking about with building that culture of trust, it's definitely something to consider, I think, for any organisation that doesn't have a policy in place, somewhere for people to go and see what they should do if they have a concern to report. Of those who responded, and again, this is when we come on to talking about perhaps, Rachel, reasons why, or things people can do differently to I suppose, engage with their employees more and build that trust. 83% will have an internal system only and don't use kind of any outsourced providers. Of those that answered as well, and these were two things I was particularly interested in. So 61% said that they don't train staff on kind of what they need to do if they want to raise a report, or actually if they have received a report and what to do about it from an employee as well. and also 42% don't train their investigators either. So we'll go on to talk a bit about that in a moment, but I thought that was really interesting, and thanks so much for those who've answered that, because it's always interesting as well to understand the current situation that people are in. But it then does highlight that trust is kind of the key element here, because 75 almost % of respondents couldn't be certain that whistleblowers were confident in reporting wrongdoing. I mean, 75% is high, and I know we asked that. That was why we asked that question at the beginning, and 10% in this particular cohort of people who responded said that they thought their employees would fear reprisal, which again is 26 people. So that's, that is a large number, isn't it, of respondents who thought that they would. So clearly, as we've said, everyone's on a journey, and there's stuff people can do to improve that and to improve their confidence in the mechanisms that they have in place, which is ultimately, what we want to help people to do. So we've established that there are lots of concerns. There are people worried about this. They want to do something about it. So in your experience then, Rachel, with our clients, what would you suggest would be some good things that they could consider to do in order to maybe improve some of those things they're concerned about?
Yeah, so this is something that does definitely come up regularly. It's a hot topic of conversation with clients, and it is definitely one of those sort of key problems to solve that we're in constant discussions about. So there's a handful of sort of key pieces that I think definitely impact trust in a positive way. So I've got a few. I'll just talk through a few of those. The first one that I need to mention is obviously just to be mindful of legislation. And by that, I mean, follow best practice. This webinar isn't about legislation today. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, but, follow the best practices. I think we had a statistic in the HR survey around how many organisations were actually aware of the EU directive. And there was still quite a portion that weren't aware of it. That is now the best practice. That's a benchmark for kind of globally, really, for whistleblowing policies and procedures to have in place. So definitely sort of read up on it and ensure you're really comfortable with your kind of legislation and what's in place. If you have any doubts, we have partners we can recommend, for you to speak to about that kind of thing. Off of the back of that, obviously having clear policies and procedures is also really important. By clear policies, I mean, your your whistleblowing policy, the document that you have in place that I know I have spoke to organisations before that sort of this is shared with employees when they start, in their welcome pack. And that's it then. It's never shared again. It's never sort of signposted or anything like that. And it's really important to do this and also make sure that it is clear and really understandable for your employees, and they can access it when they need to, which may not be that often, but they need to know where it is and be able to find it easily. And then just to comment on the processes piece of that as well, having clear processes. I mean, a lot of organisations that we speak with perhaps aren't actually very consistent with their processes. So, if you think about when you're going out to do an investigation, can you be 100% confident that all of your investigations team would all handle it in exactly the same way, would communicate with the reporter in the same way, would ask questions in the same way? That's something really important to think about, because you need the whistleblower, the reporter, to feel confident and know what the process is actually going to be before they even make a report. And just on that, just to go back to another stat from our survey, I think we've got to note that something like 17% of organisations don't have a whistleblowing policy in place. So that's quite high for that. We do have a free template on our website, or please do just get in touch with us as well if you need some help with that. If you're any of that 17%, do reach out. My next point would just be around building awareness as well. So awareness comes in loads of different sort of shapes and sizes. And I know we have customers certainly who do things like a whistleblowing week, where they might focus purely on the campaigns for 1 week. And that always, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit. I want to see that all year round, not just for 1 week of the year, and certainly not just in your onboarding and training at the beginning. So really think about things that you can do throughout the year to sort of keep your speak up processes, your policy, and encouraging it in place sort of in the back of your employees' mind throughout the year. So I mean, we saw through the survey again, I think it was 40% of companies have mandatory whistleblowing training. So 60% don't have anything at the minute, and that would be a really good starting place to look as well. So things like, you know, a whistleblowing e-learning module that's mandatory each year, not just in your welcome pack. Things like toolbox talks, if perhaps, you know, an online e-learning module isn't appropriate for your staff, you know, something that's actually on the shop floor, etc., would be really important as well. And then of course there's like your pamphlets and your FAQ cards, little wallet cards with, you know, your provider SafeCall's number on. And alongside that, I mean, the posters on back of toilet doors still is a winner. We still see that one coming through, so don't forget about that. You know, having them, we joke, but having posters in a private place is really important. And with that, I'd say one trend we're really starting to see come through now is adding QR codes to your posters. Make sure that you're removing any barriers for someone to get through and reach your provider, or to reach out to you directly internally as well. Make sure you've got links in place, etc. Yeah, I mean, ideally any of these is great, but all of them would be much better. And like I say, it is a journey. So if we can implement all of them over a period of time, and you sort of think about it as kind of like a maturity model of adding all these bits in until you really become a master of this, and we're in a place where we're just hoping to maintain the trust and not build it, that's really key. So yeah, the building awareness is a big point for me. On top of that is like your investigations and ensuring that Tom mentioned it before, actually, really eloquently, but ensuring your investigations are independent. So ensuring they're independent is really important, and a key point, but then also communicating to your employees that your investigations are independent is kind of the second point that I definitely know that some organizations fall down with. So you need to really consider that and how you're going to communicate that message ongoing, to ensure that, you know, there is that education piece, that the understanding, and it goes back to, you know, your clear processes, that people understand, you know, that it is going to be outsourced, etc. So that's an important one. Also, responding to reports, as we were saying that the co-op do really well. If you know, log in and respond to reports as soon as they come in, that's really key. Communicate with your reporters, thank them for reporting. And alongside that, you know, communicate throughout the investigations process. And when you're closing off the report, communicate with them then as well. It doesn't need to be, you know, it has to be whatever's appropriate for your organization, the level of detail you want to go into. Absolutely, you know, find what works best for you. But that is really important. Make sure you're communicating, because as we'd said before, otherwise the reporter kind of sits there. They've done something that's perhaps the biggest thing they'll do all month or all year, you know, it's something that's ate them up to report this, and then they've heard nothing back. And that's just something really important to think about. Finally, just 2 more points to make. One would just be about actually communicating your learnings. So we had one of our customers on site recently, and we got into quite an interesting conversation with them about this. But the question of sort of, how do you actually communicate to your employees that you do care, that you are actioning the reports that come through, and you do have learnings off of the back of them? It's a tricky piece to manage, but we would definitely say look at doing things like infographics, you know, anonymizing your reporting data that you've got, and we can help you do that as well. But making sure you've got kind of infographics around the themes that are coming up through your reporting channels, kind of the quantities of reports you're getting through perhaps as well. And the most important piece there is like the learnings, the positive benefits you've had from the reports coming through. And you need to share that, because that's obviously what's going to propel more people to come forward, because they're encouraged that actually action is happening off the back of it. Obviously that piece, it does take work to do, and help with that kind of anonymizing that data and things like that. But, you know, we're here to help and support you with all that as well and guide you on that journey. My final piece that I can think kind of is crucial to all of these other points is getting buy-in from your senior management as well, and making sure they understand and are authentically communicating their belief and their, you know, their stance on the importance of speaking up, and making sure that there is a positive culture around this and trust in the organization. So you know, this could be like briefings with your senior leadership team and things like that, but just making sure that they are really bought in, because obviously that impacts the rest of it as well, because the culture and the trust obviously comes from the top down with these kind of things. Yeah, so there's in a nutshell a few key points. Jo, would you have anything to add to that? Anything I've missed?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you've missed anything, but just a couple of things to expand on, really. And again, it's about recent conversations that we've had with customers that have really sort of, I suppose, brought it home to me. And I guess in context that, you know, our customers obviously have chosen to use an outsourced independent provider. But recently, one organisation was telling us that, you know, having that independence really helped with their employees speaking up, because they still have got a large number of reports through their internal channels, which is great. Then they got the same amount again through SafeCall, and they believed, I think, that, you know, they may not have got those additional reports had they not had that independence. So I think having, you know, building that trust, coming back to trust again, being able to show that there's that kind of true independence, that true ability to be anonymous. And not, you know, because when you think about that fear of reprisal, if you can be truly anonymous, which a lot of employees do struggle with internal systems, then, you know, you can speak up without that fear. And I think that was definitely, that's feedback we get so many times, isn't it, Rach, about that ability to give that peace of mind to those employees. The other point you make, which is really interesting, is about that senior leadership buy-in, and it was one of the sections on the survey. And what I found really interesting about it, and again, I was reflecting on feedback from a customer when I read this, was that the research shows 73.4% of leadership teams are interested in reports of potential wrongdoing in their organisation. And that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because as a leadership team, of course, you want to know what's going on in your organisation for all of the reasons that we've already spoken about as to why it's important. But what I found really interesting was that only 63.7% of the people who responded believed that action would be taken. Now, that's quite a low, you know, it's almost half, really. It's just more than half. But in reality, it was much higher. You know, it was very much near 100% of leadership teams would do something about it, but not everyone thought that. And I think that comes back to your point on communication, because the customer that we met said that they were very good, they felt, at reporting back to the individual who'd raised the report and communicating with them. But when it came to kind of that wider sort of communication around, this is what we're doing, you know, these are the kind of issues that we have, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because it depends on the organisation, depends on what's being raised. But, you know, it's about that kind of ability to share. These are all the great things that we're doing to try and create this culture of trust, create this speak up culture, so that people do feel, if I speak up, I'm going to be heard, something's going to be done about it, leadership are interested. So I think all of the things that you mentioned are really key. And I think the leadership team understanding kind of their role in that and their role in that communication is really important as well.
Those are some absolutely amazing stats, aren't they? I mean, actually really quite scary stats to hear, especially given everything that we talked about at the beginning, the how trust is, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, it's the mortar that holds everything else together with your employees. I'm really interested, though, obviously both of you, Rachel and Joanna, you kind of aced what really, really good looks like. You know, and Tom as well is a really good example of that. What you described is people upping their game to a really, really good level. But a lot of people on this call may be at the earlier stages of this spectrum. They may be kind of coming into this and wondering, well, there's so much to do here. What are the keys? So Rachel, actually, I'd really like to ask you, what do you think the kind of the three fundamental things that you'd recommend? And this is obviously after getting senior buy-in, so we know that's essential. You made a very great point of that earlier. So after you've got that senior leadership buy-in, what are the three key points to really start building that trust and, you know, the earlier stages before you get to acing it, as you said before?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the main theme to think about would be to communicate and educate. So just that constant piece there as well, as I've said. So to kind of sum it up nicely, I suppose I'd say you need to kind of show your employees that your systems are independent. So if you don't have an independent sort of provider like SafeCall or something outsourced, definitely consider that. But equally as well, you know, if it is internal, make sure you're showcasing that it is going to, you know, someone like your general counsel who's sitting slightly removed and things like that, and really educate them on that. Again, with just your policies and processes, the same thing with your investigations. Show they're independent, and explain that. Point 2, I would say, is just make sure they know they can be anonymous if they want to when they report, and really share that and encourage it as well. There is always the slight payoff, I suppose, that you might get a lesser quality report because you can't question it and things like that if somebody is anonymous. But we're always of the stance that if it's the payoff between not getting the report at all or someone reporting anonymously, we'll always go with, I'd rather have the report and it be anonymous. Absolutely. So anyway, show that it can be anonymous as well, and advertise this option, and really share it. Again, communicate it. And then, well, I mean, even with something like SafeCall, you know, we don't record our calls. That's the kind of thing, them sort of key pieces of information your employees might not know. And that really helps to build trust. Finally, show them you take their feedback seriously. So as we said, we definitely don't have all the answers with that, and it is something you just have to work on ongoing. But you know, sharing messaging with the reporter, when you do have a really successful outcome, share that feedback, make sure everyone knows about it, use infographics, etc. to communicate that, and do it as regularly as you can. Yeah, so overall it just comes down to like that consistent, regular education, I would say.
Lovely. That's a really, really nice place to start. So that's fantastic. I think we've got another poll that I think actually should already be live on the screens of our viewers. So fire away and let us know what your answer is. The question that we're asking them right now is, what percentage of your senior leadership team do you believe would know their legal obligations when the organisation receives a whistleblowing report? So quite an interesting question, and we'll see what people have to say. It has been live for a little while, so actually I can see that a really good amount of people have already answered.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so it's an interesting spread, really. 7.6% said less than 10%. 37.5%, by far the largest amount, said less than 50%.
Wow.
20% said more than 50%. 22.5% said more than 80%, and just 12.5% said all of them. So that's
well done to those 12.5%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What do you think that tells us then, Rachel?
Well, that less than 50%, that 37.5% is a big amount to not feel confident in it. I would definitely say consider various briefings you can do with your senior leadership team on the importance of speaking up, or you know, if you do have barriers with that, definitely like speak to SafeCall about it as well. You know, we can help you with how you would communicate that too, or even better, kind of doing them communications for you. But that's a staggering number, and it goes to show with a lot of our other stats, it kind of backs up why, as I said, it does come from the top down. If your senior leadership team really do drive the culture of an organization, and if they're not authentically communicating about this and, you know, understanding their legal obligations, etc., what's that going to say about the rest of the organization?
I think it's a really interesting point, and also I think you know, we do get, as well as the toolbox talks that Rachel talked about, leadership teams tend to be quite sort of time poor. You know, they don't have a lot of time to be doing lots of things that they might want to do. So, you know, we often get asked, is there quite a bite-sized sort of briefing that can be done at a board meeting or whatever? Because, which, you know, again, do talk to us about something of interest, because, you know, it's about being able to communicate that information, but in a quick and sort of coherent way, I think.
Absolutely. So, Rachel, back to you for this question then. Why do we think that your customers actually invest in SafeCall? What are they getting out of it? What are the keys to, you know, them being engaged with your business?
Absolutely. So, I mean, as Joe said at the beginning, we've got about 900 clients, and we're really proud to have sort of about 98% retention rate of them customers. So we're definitely doing something right somewhere along the way. So there's a couple of points that come to mind, and a lot of these we have discussed already in snippets throughout this conversation. But the first one would be our expertise, and along with that, like our quality, I suppose, as well. So Joe mentioned at the beginning, our operations team all are former police officers with a minimum of 25 years experience in the police force. That's been really intentional since when our business started, in order to encourage and really showcase the emphasis we're putting on quality of reports, you know, and really helping support those callers, or, you know, the reporters in whichever channel they choose to come through. So that's kind of like our bread and butter, is our reporting service and this core part of our product. We then also help support from the other standpoints that we've discussed today. So like from an education standpoint, you know, we've built our own whistleblowing e-learning module, which really focuses on safe call as well as best practice processes that you can have in place internally too. So we have that, and we support a lot of clients with providing that to them so that they can kind of do the first tick in the box on my checklist of sort of building trust. So that's like, you know, these education pieces are really important. So the e-learning modules, we also do, like we've mentioned, the toolbox talks. So if we can be really flexible to what works best for your employees. We also offer, you know, things like the senior leadership briefings, as we've just talked through. So all these various little education pieces that come together to have a big impact. Alongside that, then the education piece of your actual team of investigators and report recipients. We know from the start from our survey, you know, that a lot of them aren't necessarily trained to the best potential that they could be. Certainly, I think it's like 40 or 60%, 40% aren't actually trained formally. We offer those services to help making sure that you're really confident and you have the tools for success internally with running investigations and having sort of a best in class blueprint to follow. It's a bit of a tongue twister. So that's really important. And again, with that, even investigations training, we do that as well. And that all circles back around to our sort of expertise and trust that we have and our team have. Finally, alongside that, actually, we offer the investigations outsourcing services as well. So if you think, when you go back to how I described it, our sort of reporting and the quality of that is our bread and butter, but all of these services do complement that around the outside to give you kind of the whole journey to make sure you're ticking all of these boxes and building trust. And equally, you know, if you don't have the capacity or the skill set, the confidence internally to run an investigation and feel confident that it is independent, we're here to help support you with that as well. You know, we don't just give you the report and wipe our hands of it. We're here to support you with the rest of the journey too. That can be fully outsourced investigations, or it could actually be you just need like critical friend services. And by that, I mean, you know, a soundboard, somebody to come to and say, am I on the right track with this? Would this stand up in court, sort of things? We're here to help support you with that. Or it might actually be you want to do an audit of previous investigations that have been run internally, just to see actually what the quality is you're conducting internally. And we can do that too. So yeah, I think a lot of the reason why, coming back to your original question, why customers invest in SafeCall is because we can provide that whole journey piece to help support our clients and help them be successful with this and build trust. Joe, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, people often do have investigators internally, and they may well be trained, but I guess it also depends on the matter that's sort of arisen, because, you know, you might be a manufacturing company, you might be really adept at dealing with health and safety claims, but then something else may come up which, you know, is outside of your comfort zone. And that's, I think, where people do reach out to us because they feel that they might want that additional support. So I think that's a really good point. I think the other thing I was sitting here thinking was, it's not so much why people necessarily invest in SafeCall, but certainly, you know, we're growing quite significantly at the moment, and I'm doing loads of recruitment. And the single kind of thing that doesn't surprise me, but it's said by nearly every potential employee that I speak to as to why they're interested in working for us. And they often say, I just wish that we had in previous organizations. I wish we'd had a company like SafeCall so that I could have reached out to when I had a bad time with X or Y. And I always find that really interesting because it resonates with people who want to come and work with us because of the experiences they've had. And so that's possibly why, I think that a large majority of our customers really believe that they want to create that positive culture, they want to create that trust, and that's why they invest in a service like SafeCall.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I guess for anyone who's had bad experiences in the past, actually working for a company like yours is probably quite a relief.
I hope so.
Brilliant. Well, we have another poll. I think it's our last one of the day, actually. So really keen to hear what our audience has to say about this. To our audience, it is live currently. Please do let us know your thoughts. The question that we are asking is, having heard about these methods, which are you not doing today that you might like to adopt to basically make more of a positive impact? So that's a very, very interesting question, and we've had some really good responses. So let's have a look at the results here. So 38.4% said awareness campaigns, 28.2% said mandatory e-learning, 7.6% said independent investigations, and 25.6% said senior leadership education, which probably, given the results of the last poll, maybe a few other people should be considering that as well. Yeah, interesting results there. By far and large, awareness campaigns was the one that people said they've really obviously been thinking about a lot since the start of our call. That's interesting, isn't it? Jo, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, unsurprising, really. And I think we would support that is probably one of the most meaningful and impactful ways of communicating. And as Rachel said earlier, so absolutely would encourage people to think, about how they might be able to improve in those areas.
And Rachel, do you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, I mean, it always is, as we say, the kind of just when you're running your awareness campaigns, definitely consider how you can just make it the most accessible and clear communications possible. Absolutely, that would kind of be my main point. And I certainly actually something that's come up in our benchmarking reports that we do yearly, we're kind of conducting our one at the minute, looking at last year's data, is we're seeing a definite shift towards more web reports coming through. And I think that's something to be really mindful of with your advertising as well, of the awareness raising of the services that you have in place, is just consider how you're advertising that piece of obviously being able to communicate online as well as by phone or those channels too.
Fantastic. Well, look, we've also had some really lovely questions from our audience. I've just been having a quick look at them, and there's been some really fantastic, interesting questions. So look, I'm going to pose some to you, and I'm really going to pick the tougher ones to throw at you both. So the first question's from an audience member called Kate, and she says, my team are based in the US and the UK, and we are hybrid remote. Obviously a lot easier to build trust with those in the UK, as I'm able to meet with them in person and help build those relationships. But she would love to know what the best ways to help build trust remotely is. Is there a difference between what you do in person versus digitally? So yeah, very interested to hear about that.
That's such an interesting question. Thanks, Kate. I think, it has been a challenge generally, hasn't it? So, and obviously post-COVID, we've all had that experience of working from home, and actually we saw, lots of different types of matters and things raised at that time from people feeling isolated from working at home. So yeah, I can totally understand the question. I think for me, it's similar types of things though. So we offer a lot of online training courses, so we don't just do kind of face-to-face training courses. I think that, the e-learning that Rachel mentioned, so just about being able to make it accessible for people who are working from home. But then I think, I guess finding a way of checking in, and I don't know the size of the team or anything like that, but, perhaps if you've got managers who are well trained, then personally checking in with their teams working from home and having those conversations, really considering, how best to interact with those people is, I think the fact that Kate's even recognised it is a great start, isn't it? But those would be some of my kind of ideas, I guess. I don't know, Rachel, if you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's a really interesting question, but definitely don't have all the answers for it. We were again discussing with a client recently that it would be really interesting to see and understand the engagement rates of those hybrid workers and workers from home who actually are reporting, and if there is less engagement there. I don't have them stats for you right now, but certainly something we're looking at doing in the future and understanding a little bit more, because I think hybrid working is definitely here to stay. I think what Joe's mentioned, things online that you can do, e-learning modules, and checking in, on a more personal level is going to be really important, even more so when you're at home. I think that is probably one of the key points, is that you just need to do more of everything when people are at home, because you can't see them. You can't see, how they're doing and how they're feeling. On a more practical level as well, I think, like, for some of our clients that have hybrid workers, we've done things like screensavers and landing pages for them where they can have FAQs as well. So like a page off of SafeCall's website that's got a lot more information on the service and things like that. And, think about things you can do digitally that would be on the background on someone's laptop as well. Speak to your IT team about that and what you can do there too, for sure.
Yeah, some really, really good answers there. So, yeah, fantastic. Thank you both for those. Another interesting question that we have here, this is from someone called Jane, and they said, we are exploring introducing colleague champions to encourage people to raise issues. They're just really interested if either of you have any thoughts on that, or what's the best way to go into that if it's something that you'd recommend.
Amazing. Well, I think we've definitely, there's some organizations we speak with that have like whistleblowing champions, especially, with the EU directive, that's really encouraging you to have on-site members of the team like that as well. And especially, obviously, we don't know much about your organization, but if you're a large organization or you're quite displaced in a lot of senses, that's really, really key. And having someone who understands the policies and can communicate it, and sort of an expert on hand, sort of in that sense, definitely hats off to you if you're looking at doing that. That is advanced level.
I think as well, it can be, I think that would be great where you've got lots of different locations which are perhaps different sizes, different types of workforce, because what you don't want, I guess, is to have some kind of really well kind of communicated with and really, I suppose, advanced sites, and then others which are forgotten about or have less of an opportunity. So I think having those people who are really focused on doing that will absolutely support you on your journey. So yeah, congratulations on that idea.
Brilliant, excellent. That's good to hear. Someone's obviously going down the right road, aren't they? Which is great.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting question. I think it raises a bigger question, so we'll see. But this is from someone named Amy. So thank you very much, Amy, for sending this in. And they said, my question is, how do you transition complaints which are not strictly whistleblowing and should really be dealt with under an internal grievance procedure? That's very interesting, isn't it? Is there a line there? Where is the line? Interesting.
Rachel, you must get asked this every day, so I'll let you answer.
Definitely. From a SafeCall perspective, I'm not sure if you have something like SafeCall in place already, but certainly from our perspective, we do see a volume of reports come through that are more HR grievance related, and it is kind of the nature of the beast in a way. I hate that phrase, but in this sort of scenario, it is you're advertising an external number and the ability to be anonymous in doing so. So we do see reports come through that are, either somebody's been through a HR grievance process and they're not happy with the outcome, so they come to SafeCall. So that definitely does happen. But equally, our stance on it actually is that somebody reporting through to SafeCall, we only have one small part of the picture. We might send that report through to you and it might actually join up a load of dots with something else that's been going on under the surface or something that's been reported internally. So we think it's actually really important that you get all of those reports and that we share those with you. And certainly I'd hope that you think about it in the same way in that context, that it might not be the totally appropriate channel, but it could be, it could actually be related to something else. With that, though, actually going back to your question, I think there's definitely a point of you just need to communicate with the reporter. So if you do have something, if you are using a messaging system like our platform, communicating with them and letting them understand that this process needs to go down a different route is really key. So that would be my sort of my suggestion if you're receiving the reports and for the ones you've got. I'd then go back to the piece I've been saying earlier, which is the education. So I know for the likes of even Tom, I'll pick on you at the co-op, they have a landing page on SafeCall's website, which has got FAQs on it, which they have an FAQ which says, if you have a HR grievance, is this the right process to go down? And they say, we would encourage you to go down this route and email this email address. So actually advertising that and your other options available where you have sort of the space to do so. Obviously a poster might not be the best place for that, but if you can do that somewhere on your intranet or site like that, that would really help, I think.
And the only thing I would add to that as well is if somebody calls us up and you've given us some I guess guidelines as to the type of areas you would like us to point them in, if it's clear that perhaps SafeCall is not the right avenue. So for an example, if it's an employee assistance program might be more appropriate, we can certainly highlight those numbers to the person calling so that they've got that available to them as well. So there are lots of different ways that, you know, we can support making sure people get pointed in the right direction. But like Rachel says, that person's made the effort to contact SafeCall, so we will always pass on that information.
Fantastic, yeah. Well, look, we've got a little bit of time left. Let's squeeze in one more question here. This is quite an interesting one, and I think that Rachel, this is really your kind of area of expertise here. Someone's asked, they obviously have an anonymous system in place already, but they're obviously listening to what you were saying about actually being able to kind of know a little bit more information is useful. So they're asking, how do you transition from an anonymous system to actually knowing, you know, who's giving you feedback and being able to kind of use that information?
Oh, so explain that again. I'm not quite grasped the whole question there.
So I think someone has so this is a person named Kate, and what they've asked is they're obviously using an anonymous system, but they'd like a little bit more information about where the feedback is coming from. So basically how to move to a system where they can get a little bit more information about who is you know who's requiring help.
Oh, okay. So like in our system, obviously you can use our messaging section where you can communicate with the reporter directly. So we can definitely help and support you with things like that. And the insights off of the back of those, you know, we collect an awful lot of reporting data, anonymized reporting data on the kind of reports we're getting through, you know, your substantiation rates of your reports, the themes that are coming up in those reports. Equally, if you are getting anonymous reports through, we often have the ability to actually get semi-anonymous reports. So it's quite, I don't know, it's just unique to SafeCall, but certainly something we pride ourselves on, especially if someone rings up. We have the ability to try and encourage them to be a semi-anonymous reporter. And in that scenario, we have their details at SafeCall, so we can act as a little bit of a mediator for you to get a little bit more information from that whistleblower. So yeah, I think our reporting and things like that would definitely be helpful there. I'm not sure if I've completely answered that question right, but do follow up with me if not, or Joe, if you want to input any more there.
I mean, I'm not sure I fully understand the question either, but I think, you know, ultimately there is a requirement for people to be able to be anonymous, and that's their right, and they need to kind of allow that, obviously. But I think what's great about our communication portal in the system is it's like a WhatsApp type conversation. So if you log in, you can go and have a conversation with them. They remain anonymous, but obviously you'll be able to signpoint them towards anything that you want to give them more support. They may then decide to share their contact details at a later date, because ultimately a lot of the people who don't want to share is because they're worried, they're nervous, and perhaps once they know who's dealing with it, they'll feel more comfortable to share more information with you. So there's definitely mechanisms that can support, and like Rachel says, you get a lot of insights from those anonymous reporters anyway, to be able to go and investigate and resolve whatever the issue is that they've raised.
Yeah, I think you both nailed it there, really. I think that's what they're asking is, you know, how do you find out a bit more about the demographic that has problems in your organization to be able to help them? So I think you both hit it on the head there. Well, I'm sorry to say we're pretty much out of time now, but it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you both, Rachel and Diana. Thank you so much for your time, and also to Tom as well for giving some insight from Co-op. It's been fantastic. If we didn't get to any of your questions to our audience, I'm sure that Call will not mind following up with you afterwards. Go and have a conversation with them. There should be links around the screen right now to catch up and have a chat with them. And yeah, it's just been absolutely illuminating. So thank you all so much. Absolute pleasure. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Kieran.
Thanks so much.